A figure appears at the edge of the path just as people are realizing they can't keep walking the same way. She isn't in a hurry. She doesn't promise shortcuts. She carries no tools for fixing or forcing. She knows the terrain too well for that. She moves by listening to the places where breath tightens, where desire thins, and where love keeps going even as ease slips away. Those who notice her don't always know her name at first. They just feel the strange relief of no longer being alone on the road. If you've been listening to this season, you've heard me talk about Reset Your Erotic Rhythm, the program I'm opening very soon for couples who love each other, but feel stuck in patterns that have slowly made intimacy heavier than it used to be. And if you're still here, still listening, there's usually a really good reason for that. Most of the people who find their way to this podcast are deeply loving, thoughtful humans. You care about your partner so much. You care about the relationship. You've tried to talk things through. You've tried to be patient and generous and understanding. You've probably had moments where you thought, we're good people. Why does this feel so hard? Or we're putting in so much effort, but things aren't getting easier. What I see over and over again is that what's happening is you're trying to carry something much bigger than just the two of you. You're holding emotional patterns that didn't even start with you and ways of relating that were shaped long before either of you knew what intimacy was supposed to feel like. And when those patterns start running the relationship, intimacy quietly slips out the side door, not because the love is gone, but because there's no room left for ease. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm exists for that exact moment. It's a guided relational container for couples who want intimacy to feel alive again without one person becoming the teacher, the translator, or the emotional manager. It's designed so that both partners are supported in their own learning and then gently brought back together in a way that restores connection, safety, and desire. Let's start at the beginning. It usually begins like this. You love your partner, there's history there, and tenderness and inside jokes, a life you've built together, and yet somewhere along the way, it starts to feel like you're walking through familiar terrain that suddenly doesn't make sense anymore. Conversations loop, intimacy feels effortful, desire feels quieter or further away or like something you keep meaning to come back to. You look around and think, why does this feel so hard when we care so much? You keep going anyway and you adjust. You carry more. You tell yourself this is just what long-term relationships are like. And then usually when you're tired enough to stop forcing, something else appears. Kind of like a presence walking alongside you and saying, you're not lost. You're just trying to navigate something no one ever taught you how to move through. And that space of pause is where Reset Your Erotic Rhythm, my live couples course, lives. It exists for couples who are standing in that in-between place where love is still very much alive, but the old ways of relating no longer work. Where neither person is wrong, but both are exhausted. Where intimacy hasn't disappeared, it's just waiting for the conditions to change. What is needed is a solution that doesn't barge in like the oppressive systems at play did many years ago. It arrives slowly and organically and regeneratively. It comes quietly. It's shaped by listening to patterns, to histories, to the places where people keep getting tired in the same way. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm emerged just like that, not to fix or correct, but to move alongside what was already happening, to pay attention to where intimacy thins, where effort replaces ease, and where love keeps going but aliveness struggles to breathe. And she learned the terrain by walking it, by noticing where people slow down, where they start doubting themselves, and where they keep trying to adjust instead of asking whether the path itself needs to change. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm arrived in a land already shaped by centuries of footsteps, worn paths where people had learned how to love by watching what survived. In this land, closeness had rules. Women learned to read the weather before it changed, to sense shifts before words were spoken, to to keep the hearth warm even when they were cold themselves. Men learned different lessons: how to hold themselves together, how to keep moving, how to swallow fear, softness, longing, anything that might slow them down or pull them apart. No one called these lessons cruel. They were called normal. They were called just the way things are. So when two people met and tried to build a life together, they did what everyone before them had done. They followed the paths already carved into the ground. At first, the road felt familiar, easy even, but over time, it narrowed. Conversations began looping back on themselves like travelers circling the same clearing, and still they kept walking. They thought the problem was them. They thought they needed better tools, better words, better effort, but the truth was simpler and harder. The land itself was exhausted. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm stepped into this world without a weapon and without a map. She wasn't there to fix anyone or lead them out. She came to listen, to the ground, to the patterns, to the places where people kept getting lost. She noticed something others had missed, that no one had ever been taught how to rest together, that intimacy had been asked to survive inside systems built for endurance and not aliveness. So instead of asking couples to try harder on the same narrow paths, she began gathering them around fires, along wider roads, in places where no one had to pretend they were tired. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the land began to soften. Paths widened, breath returned, and people realized they weren't failing at a journey. They were walking one that had never been redesigned. This is what Reset Your Erotic Rhythm was determined to do: to redesign the paths that people walk to come together, to narrow them to include all of the nuance of human experience, to create room for actual love. The reason I am talking about Reset Your Erotic Rhythm, my couples program like this, as a character in a story that's walking this path, is because she really is alive to me. This program is so close to my heart, and it really has grown completely organically from the ground. It has grown through my experience with the couples I've worked with one-on-one. It's come from my community events. It's come from my endless fascination, maybe even obsession with relationships, trying to figure out how they work, breaking them down into their elements, and building them back up into something that actually sustains life, the kind of relating that we're all longing so much for. This group program was created because I saw over and over again that the challenges that couples were dealing with weren't just about their relationship. It wasn't just about them too. And I know it feels personal and it feels specific and it feels like your dynamic, your patterns, your stuck place. But what I saw over and over again is people carrying far more than their actual relationship. What they were carrying was generations of relational training that none of us ever consciously agreed to. We're carrying ways of loving that were built around survival and not actual intimacy, and ways of partnering that were shaped by duty and gender roles and silence and endurance, and ways of being together that were never designed for nervous systems like ours that are sensitive, aware, longing for depth and aliveness. So when you feel exhausted while you're still loving your partner, when you feel like you're doing so much emotional work just to keep things steady, and when intimacy feels like something you're constantly maintaining instead of inhabiting, of course, all that feels really heavy, because most of us were never taught how to be in relationships that are both secure and alive and adaptable and regenerative. We were taught how to keep things together and how to avoid conflict or to manage each other's feelings or to perform closeness, not how to stay connected to ourselves inside the relationship. And the truth is, this work was never meant to be done alone. These patterns were created at a systemic community level, and they need to be dismantled in that same way. You were never supposed to individually unlearn centuries of relational conditioning inside a two-person container, while also staying attracted and emotionally regulated and sexually alive and kind. And that's not a personal failure, that's a structural issue. And This is exactly why Reset Your Erotic Rhythm exists. Because people who care deeply need support, not just insight, when they start waking up to how much they've been holding. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm, or RYER, is a response to care and to consciousness and to the moment when you realize, I don't want to keep doing this the hard way. It's a place where the weight you've been carrying gets named and shared and slowly set down. Because when the burden lightens, connection starts to return on its own because it's given the conditions to grow. So let's go back to our story. Our main character, Reset Your Erotic Rhythm, continues walking. She begins to notice the rules people kept trying to live by, the ones handed down as truth, even when they didn't fit the terrain anymore. Rules that said intimacy could be restored if you just picked the right side. That desire lived in polarity alone, that one person must lead and the other follow, that one must soften while the other hardens, that if things weren't working, someone must be doing it wrong. And these rules were everywhere, painted on signposts, whispered in advice, taught as certainty, and yet, wherever people tried to follow them, the same thing happened. Women tried to shrink or sharpen themselves into something more desirable, something less, too much. Men tried to step into roles they'd never been shown how to inhabit without armor. Couples tried to contort themselves into shapes that promised passion, but quietly stripped away tenderness. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm didn't argue with these rules. She simply watched what they did. She saw how they flattened complexity, how they turned living, breathing relationships into diagrams, how they asked people to override their bodies in the name of a theory, so she chose a different way. Instead of dividing the world into forces that had to oppose each other, she paid attention to rhythm, to timing, to capacity, to the way closeness and distance naturally ebb and return when there is safety. She listened to nervous systems instead of ideals. She treated desire not as a performance to maintain, but as something that responds to being met. Where others asked couples to pick roles, she asked them to slow down. Where others demanded polarity, she made room for nuance. Where others promised certainty, she offered attunement. This was not a rejection of masculinity or femininity. It was a refusal to make them cages. In her presence, no one was asked to become someone else in order to be wanted. No one was reduced to a function. No one was blamed for adapting to a world that taught survival over intimacy. And slowly, something shifted. People stopped trying to force desire back into their lives. They stopped measuring themselves against rules that never accounted for history, trauma, or tenderness. They began to feel again, not because they were doing intimacy right, but because they were finally allowed to be whole. This is the magic of Reset Your Erotic Rhythm. There are no shortcuts, no spectacle, just a quiet, radical act of letting complexity belong in the space between you and your partner. By the time people find their way here, they've usually tried a lot of things already to fix the challenges in their relationship. Maybe books or podcast binges, therapy, maybe inhabit your feminine better, or just communicate better, conversation scripts. Reset Your Erotic Rhythm is so different because the way that I have designed this program is much like many estuaries that are leading into this larger societal and cultural shift that's needed right now. There are a lot of levels that are intentionally included in this program that create the systems that change the flow of the river towards the new relational paradigm that all of our souls are yearning for so deeply. One way Reset Your Erotic Rhythm does this is by taking generational healing super seriously. This program isn't framed as individual self-improvement. It's not your attachment style is the problem or your communication skills need work. What we're ultimately working with here is inherited relational patterns, ways of loving and partnering, desiring, caretaking, withdrawing, and surviving that did not start with you or your partner. That's why this work can't be done in isolation, not all of it. This is systems level healing, not just an individual growth path. And that's also why reset happens in community. The group aspect of this program is so important and creates so much magic. When you hear other couples naming the same dynamics, the same exhaustion, the same disconnection, the same longing, something really important happens. The shame drops and the self blame softens. The nervous system realizes, oh, this isn't just us. That's how patterns that have been passed down for generations actually start to unwind, not by fixing individuals, but by changing the relational field they exist in. Another thing that makes this program really different is that it's not reductionist. And that is a pet peeve of mine that I see in so much material that's available out there on relationships. A lot of relationship content out there boils everything down to polarity, masculine, feminine, leader, follower, pursuer, distancer, and I just don't think humans actually work that way. I don't believe those frames capture the real complexity of long-term relationships, and I don't believe they actually help couples feel closer most of the time. This program won't flatten your relationship into roles, and it does not pathologize one partner, and it doesn't rely on simplistic explanations for deeply layered dynamics. This is also not a program that blames men, and I want to say that really explicitly, because blaming men actually creates a dynamic where we are quietly asking women to carry more emotional labor in the name of growth. Because if it's true that men just are that way and they're just less capable than us, then that leaves us in a position where we are going to carry the mental load forever. It also roots in a kind of poison in your relationship that just starts attacking your foundation under the soil that eventually spreads to your entire relationship ecosystem. In this program, there's so much room for rage and anger of all of the centuries past that have led to all of these challenges that we're experiencing in connection today. And it does not reduce the problem down to, if he wanted to, he would. We need so much more nuance than that. At the core of this work is something much more grounded, and it's that both partners need empathy, and both partners need patience, and both partners need to feel understood and not fixed. That's why in this program there are separate learning tracks, so each partner can actually hear themselves think and feel and reflect without performing or defending. And there are guided spaces where you come back together that are specifically designed for somatic reset and repair, so the integration does not fall totally on you. You are not expected to translate the material. You're not expected to convince your partner. You're not expected to be the bridge. Actually, even the process of inviting your partner into reset your erotic rhythm is facilitated. You are supported in how to open that conversation, so you're not alone at the very first step, trying to find the perfect words or manage their reaction. That part matters a lot more than people realize, because a lot of people see this program and they think, oh, my partner, my husband would never join something like this. And I want to say that I have gotten that reaction a bunch of times, and then the very next message I get from them a couple days later is, oh my God, he's doing it. I can't believe it. The PDF worked, the video worked, the script worked. So I want to say that is a really common worry, and the process for that is baked into the material so that you're not alone. Another special aspect about this program is that it's simple and accessible by design. The change that we're all seeking is both like giant systems level change, cultural change, where reversing the flow of a river, like a gigantic river. And at the same time, it's also very simple. What's needed is not a bunch of processes and complex theory, because what we're all yearning for is space and to be seen and to be held and to be loved. The daily material for this program are simple, short audio practices that are delivered straight to your inbox that you just push play on. So you can listen to them while driving and walking, lying in bed or making coffee. It was built for real people with real lives. If you're thinking, God, I wish I had time for this, you do. If you drive for 7 to 15 minutes anywhere a day, you can listen to this material just in that drive. And I've made them so that they're really potent because I don't like wasting people's times. And everything that I create is with a great effort to combat hustle culture. And I'm not going to flood you with a bunch of tasks and tips and tricks and checklists that just make this program feel longer and longer to deliver some perceived value. This is potent, well thought out, very intentional material that only requires up to 15 minutes a day. Other than the daily short audio practices, we meet once a week for our group calls for 8 weeks, 7 weeks for the men. And the feedback that I receive after every single one of those calls is, I wish they were longer. I wish we had more time together. I could be with these women for ages. Every little ounce of effort you put into this program is like a super nutrient dense drop of fertilizer that you're going to put back into the garden of your intimate world and your intimate world with your partner. Nothing is wasted. In the live calls, this is where people stop feeling like they're in a program and they start really feeling like they're part of something. And you get to be in the room and hear your experience reflected back through others. You get to feel held in real time. And so all of those estuaries, the generational context, the community, the nuance, the equal partnership, the simple daily practices, and live relational support, that's what makes Reset Your Erotic Rhythm what it is. And it's what creates all of that momentum to truly create the foundation for that new paradigm of relating and connecting that all of our souls are yearning for so deeply. It's not a hack or a mindset shift. It's a container designed to actually change how being in your relationship feels without asking you to do it all alone. It is highly supported, all of this effort that you're putting in. So this 8-week course starts on February 23rd. Like I said, we have live calls once a week. There are 3 tracks, one for the woman, one for the man, and then the very last one is when we all come together and you join as a couple. And this is really for couples who still care, where there's love there's history, there's a desire to stay connected, even if things feel strained or confusing right now. And it's especially for women who feel tired of carrying the emotional load of their relationship. If you are the one initiating the conversations or tracking the feelings or trying to keep intimacy alive, this program was built with you in mind. And it's for men who want to show up differently but haven't been given a clear, supportive way to do that. Men who aren't checked out but who may feel overwhelmed and defensive or unsure how to meet the depth their partner is asking for without losing themselves. It's for couples who've tried things before, therapy, books, workshops. If you've done some work and it still feels like you're circling the same pattern, that doesn't mean it didn't work. It usually means it wasn't held in the right container. If you're feeling a pull to sign up, please don't wait. The first 10 couples to sign up for this course are going to get a heavily discounted rate, which is something that I'm only announcing on this podcast. For everybody else, the price will just increase from one day to the next. I'm not even going to announce that on my website. So if you're hearing this, you're feeling the pull, go sign up now. Do not wait. I do have a feeling that this program is going to sell out. And when it's full, it's full. So that is what Reset Your Erotic Rhythm is. That's the shape of it. It's how it works. That's what stepping into this actually looks and feels like. Everything is in the show notes. And whenever I talk about this program, there's something that never quite fits into logistics or timeline or structure either, because this work has never been about what happens inside the program. It's about when something really truly meets you, about that moment where doing nothing different starts to feel heavier than taking a step, and about recognizing a presence you didn't know how to name but somehow totally trust. And that's the part I really want to leave you with. So let's return to our little character. Reset your erotic rhythm. Doesn't chase anyone down the road, she never has. She waits in the places where people finally pause, where the old way of moving starts to ache just enough that continuing feels harder than choosing something new. She recognizes those who are ready, not by what they say, but by how they slow when they feel her nearby. Some will keep walking, that's always been true, but the ones who turn toward her do so with a strange calm, as if they found something they didn't know they were searching for, but somehow trust completely. If you feel her here, now is the moment. It's because the timing is right. Not because everything is broken, but because you don't want to keep doing intimacy the way you've been doing it. Because you know there's more ease, more closeness, more aliveness available than what you've been settling for. She doesn't ask for certainty, only willingness. The door is open for a short while before the path narrows again. If this feels like the moment to stop walking alone, you know what to do. She'll be waiting, she's in the show notes, and I hope to see you inside. Love this podcast? Tell the internet. Leave a 5-star review and make the machines work for our pleasure for once.